So I have a question for the congregation this morning. How many people does it take to change a light bulb? You know, it depends on what kind of people, yeah? And there's a whole series of jokes on a variation of this very one. I've got my own favorites, which I'll share a few with you. One is, how many chiropractors does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but it'll take 6 visits. You've ever been to a chiropractor? I have a good friend who told me this one. How many hipsters does it take to change a light bulb? It's some obscure number. You've probably never heard of it. And this is one I picked up in New York, and which has stuck with me till today. How many New Yorkers does it take to change a light bulb? That's none of your business. And one I've learned more recently here in Orland. How many interrupting cows does it take to change a light bulb? Moo! It's a funny joke. And it's funny because it's based on our common experience of changing a light bulb. And we all know what it's like when a light bulb flickers or just abruptly goes out. And it happens for a number of reasons, right? Sometimes we drop a bulb and the filament breaks and it no longer works. Sometimes on really hot bulbs, if it has some oil or dirt on it, it'll overheat and blow. Yep. And sometimes just over time being turned off and on for too long, it lives out its lifespan and it goes out. Now the thing about a light bulb is it never changes itself, does it? It always takes another or a group of people, sometimes, to change a light bulb. We've been talking through a series this last Epiphany season about letting your light shine. And as mentioned in the children's sermon, it involves getting plugged into God and staying connected to that source of power, making the decision to let our light shine, to not let the shade that people cast get us down, whether that shade is from outside or from within. But sometimes, even despite the best of our intentions, sometimes our light in us still flickers. And sometimes we need the help of others to get us powered up and back on track. Yes? This came home to me this last week. Monday was an absolutely gorgeous day. After the rains and the hail of this last weekend, Monday was a beautifully clear winter day. And mid-afternoon, I couldn't stand it any longer, and I got in my tribute and went out to Black Butte Lake, where I like to walk and pray. And coming down up over the hill and into Eagle Pass, I pulled aside at the parking station to get my parking ticket to enter the camping grounds. And after getting my ticket, getting back in my car, I turned the key, and I'm greeted with that awful sound, that I get out and I open the hood, and lo, the battery was all corroded over. My battery was dead. And so I had at that moment 2 options. I could either walk all the way back into Orland, that's roughly 8 miles, give or take, and get a battery and get a wrench, and then walk all the way back with said battery and said wrench and replace it myself. As lovely as the day as it wasn't too appealing. And the second option was to call a friend. Indeed, I called a friend, and whether he was busy or not, he said, "I'll be right over." He came by, gave me a jump, and not only that, but followed me all the way back to Les Schwab. And not only that, but stayed with me, and we had some coffee and conversation while they diagnosed the problem, got in a new battery, and took their ounce of flesh. They did a great job. You know, sometimes, as the Beatles famously sung, you know, we get by with a little help from our friends. We're not made in this world alone. We belong in a community. We belong in our families. We belong in a community of faith who is there to help us sometimes when our battery goes dead, when our bulb burns out, and helps encourage and uplift us and sometimes console us when we are so burned out on life. The story doesn't end there, though. For it was evening and it was morning the second day. And on Tuesday, middle afternoon, I drive over to Chico to meet with our designer while working on the solar project. And we had a very productive meeting. And before coming back to Orland, I stopped to get a cup of coffee. After getting my cup of coffee, I get back in the car, turn over the ignition, and that terrible sound again. I think, oh boy. I get out, again, look under the hood, and the battery's looking fine, so I'm thinking it's probably the worst. Probably the alternator has gone out. So here, in this instance, I don't have any options. I don't have my garage or my tools, and even if I did, in these newer engines, it's buried way beneath the battery. There's no way I can get to this alone, and I need some help. And so I call my friend. And whether he was busy or not, he said that he wasn't. And he drove all the way across the valley for the second day in a row to give me a jump. And to follow me all the way back to R&R, where they diagnosed it as a faulty alternator. And this time they took their pound of flesh, which still hurts. No, they did a fantastic job, and I was happy to pay it. God didn't make Adam alone. He created also Eve. He created also Abel and Cain. And he created the entire human race. And as much as sometimes we would wish to isolate ourselves and walk without any interference with other people or without having to rely on people, we are meant to be there for one another, to encourage and equip and build up one another in times of trouble. That's what we are meant to be. It's notable that in the gospel today, we see the very same. For Simon, when he casts down his net on the injunction of the Lord and pulls it up, lo, the nets are so full, they're to breaking. And what does he do? He calls out to his friends. And they bring in their boat, and they together pull it up, and not only that, they share the catch, and it's sinking both boats. What would Peter be doing if he had nobody there? He would not only be tearing the nets, but he'd be sinking the ship. It's not a real big deal when you've got Jesus as your co-pilot. Jesus is pretty adept at handling troubles at sea, yes? But he calls upon his friends, and they get out of it together. It's notable, too, that through the course of Jesus' ministry, he doesn't go out alone, but he has with him the 12 apostles, and he shares his work with them, sending them out to teach and them out to heal. It's notable, too, that at the lowest point of Jesus' life, as he's praying to God in the Garden of Gethsemane, he is not out alone, but he bids his friends to come and be there and wait with him. We are not meant to be alone. As helpful as it was for my friend to come out and help change the battery and the alternator and get me back on track, I could tell God was at work in a much more profound way. I debated talking about this, but I feel moved too. This last year, as many of you know, was a very difficult year for me. A very destructive year, and one filled with loss. Looking back, it was the most destructive year of my entire life. And the problem was not just the loss in itself, but sharing this issue with my bishop, who's essentially my pastor. I told him that it's not the things that I have lost this last year that really get to me. It's the problem I have is that I've lost so much trust. I put myself in a situation where I, by my own folly, trusted individuals and trusted people in ways that I shouldn't have trusted. And things worked out in a way that I was not only turned on, but was greatly let down. And the issue after coming out of all this was that I couldn't trust anybody. Because people who I'd really deeply trusted, it turned out to not come through for me. And this had been a problem I'd been dealing with for months. And my own light was flickering in my heart. And it's difficult to say as friendly as it was, how much this little act of kindness meant to me. That a friend dropping whatever he was doing to come out and help me. And it got me thinking in an entirely different way. You know, it jolted me. And I started to think, well, how about all the other people who had done so many kind things over this last year and this last, my whole time here? All the letters, all the words of encouragement, the little gifts of jam and the salve that brings. All of the personal help. And I mean, for Pete's sake, a couple of the congregation took me in for 7 months of this last year. I mean, there's so much kindness and goodness shown at the same time. Not only did that act over 2 days fix my car, but it started to indeed heal my heart. And that's what we're there for, one another. To encourage one another. To assist one another. And indeed to, when need be, change a broken light bulb. So how many people does it take to change a light bulb? Oh, it depends. But it's certainly more than one. And many times we can't change it alone. May God bless you and be with you all. Amen.